Hi everyone, it's Amelia from SHSAT 800, and thank you so much for joining me. I am releasing weekly videos building from the ground up from the most foundational math concepts and then tackling the most challenging ones. So today we're going to be reviewing fixed fee per unit rate linear questions along with inequalities. And if you're not quite sure what that means, make sure you stick around for the entire video. I'm going to start with the demo example, and then we're just going to work through different levels until we reach the most challenging one, and then I'm going to let you go with some more practice questions. But obviously, at any moment, go ahead and pause the video, try it for yourself before coming back for the answer, which I will be sharing a step-by-step walkthrough. And make sure in the bio, you can actually download a worksheet so you work alongside it with me, and you can record the most foundational concepts. You can review them as we build up to more challenging questions later on. And yeah, without further ado, let's go ahead and jump into the first practice question. And just keep in mind, besides this question that I'm showing you on the screen right now, all the other questions are sourced from past SHSAT exams. So they're extremely accurate to what you're going to see on test day. So let's start with the first question here. A bakery charges a $3 setup fee plus $2.50 for each cupcake in a custom order. If Maya's total bill was $20, how many cupcakes did she order? So I'm going to start by setting up a bar diagram so you can get a better idea of like how I'm visualizing this. So right now we know that the total bill costs $20 here. $20, right? And there's a $3 setup fee. So that $3 is, I'll just label this part, our $3 here is basically a one-time expense. So that's not related to our variable. In this case, our variable is this one right here, each cupcake. So each cupcake is going to be what our variable X represents, because the cost depends on the number of cupcakes we order, and they told us that the cost for each cupcake is $2.50. So in this other section of the bar diagram, this represents $2.50 times X, which is the number of cupcakes. And those two added together is what's going to get us that final $28. So let's go ahead and set up a more formal equation for this. So it's going to look like, if I write it on, let's see, I'll just write it underneath here. It's going to be that $20 is equal to $3 plus $2.50 times X. And then from there, we're going to go ahead and isolate the variable X. First, we have to remove the constant. In this case, the constant is essentially the number on the side of the variable that is not attached to the variable. So it's the $3 hanging around there. We're going to go ahead and subtract from each side. We're left with 25 is equal to 2. And then from there, we want to divide by the coefficient, which is 250. So once we divide those, we would get that 25 divided by 250 is equal to 10. So if we were to simplify this, X is equal to 10 cupcakes. And you may be wondering, how did I do that quick mental math? Well, I'm just going to quickly show it here. So we know that 250 times 10 by just like moving the decimal point over here is equal to 25. So I was able to identify that 250 is basically a 10x multiple of 25, if that makes sense. It's 1/10 exactly of 25. So the key foundational takeaways I want you to take from this is, first, that we are going to be trying to identify the fixed amount, which in this case was a $3 setup fee, but that depends on the context of every word problem. And then we're going to identify the variable and its rate. So in this case, the rate of the variable being the cupcakes is $2.50 because it's $2.50 extra for each cupcake. Right, so we have the fixed, the variable, and its corresponding rate. And then this is going to be set up in an equation that looks like this. It's going to be the total is equal to the fixed plus the rate times the variable. So as we work along through these questions, I want you to keep returning to this equation that we just identified over here. I'm just going to quickly highlight that. Okay, perfect. So let's keep that in mind as we work through. As we approach inequalities, which basically means that instead of having an equal sign, it's going to be greater than or less than, etc. It's going to look slightly different, but the setup will stay exactly the same in terms of the positioning of all terms. So let's start over here with part 1. So Julie is at a clothing store. She wants to buy a bag for, I'm going to actually highlight as I read, and I recommend that you do the same. She wants to buy a bag for $18.75 and some t-shirts for $9.25 each. She can spend no more than $50. So she's capped at $50. Which inequality can be used to find the number of t-shirts X that Julie can purchase? I'm just going to go ahead and zoom out a little bit so you see that equation on the screen as we work through this first one. So first I want to identify which one is the fixed fee. So as you can see, there's nothing here that's saying one-time cost or fixed. So we have to do a little bit of, look at the context to figure that out. So it says that she wants to buy a bag for $18.75 and then some t-shirts for $9.25 each. So what I recognize here is that t-shirts, right, over here, find the number of t-shirts X. It already gives us that, it already tells X and it represents t-shirts. So over here, the cost of the t-shirts, I'm just going to write here, cost of t-shirts is equal to $9.25 times X. And then from there, we can go ahead and start setting up our inequality. So it's going to be 9.25x plus the fixed amount is going to be the price of the bag, because they're not asking us how many bags is she getting. She's only getting one bag. So that's just one fixed cost plus the 18.75. So just based on writing that already, we can eliminate 2 of the answer choices. So we can see here that they identified the wrong rate for X. The rate is $9.25 each, not $18.75, because that's the cost of the bag, not the shirts. So A and B don't look correct. Now it's between C and D. The only thing is the direction of the inequality symbol. So you can see here that C, actually what I like to do when I'm looking at these is I like to identify what does each side of this equation represent. So in this case, the left-hand side represents the amount Julie spends, and then the right-hand side of $50 represents the maximum she can spend, max. So she can't go over $50, which means that the amount Julie spends should be less than or equal to the maximum amount that she can spend. Oh, I realize you can't even see it. So then from there, knowing that, we know that C is the correct answer, because it means that the amount Julie spends between the bag and how many shirts she gets for $9.25 each is less than $50. Okay, let's keep rolling along here. So question 113. Keep in mind that I also will send a list of where I sourced all these practice questions from. So if you want to revisit that exact practice test, you can go ahead and do so. So a team is participating in a contest to collect canned goods for food drive. The team has 53 points and must have a total of at least 100 points. So seeing those words "at least" signals to me that there's an inequality. The team earns 5 points for each can of food a member collects. Which inequality can be used to find X, the number of cans of food the team needs to collect to win a prize? So first, I want to identify what is the rate of X, which is the number of cans of food the team needs. And so we're trying to see how many points do they get for each can of food. Take a second to look at the problem, and if you don't see it already, it shows us that it's 5 points for each can of food. So I'm going to quickly write that here, 5x. And then we have the fixed amount, which is the original amount of points they've already collected, so plus 53. And then that's going to be compared to 100, which is the minimum that they must win, the minimum of their total to win a prize. So what this means is that 5x plus 53 must be greater than or equal to 100 because it has to be at least that amount. So that means our answer, if we look at it over here, our answer is going to be not these two. 53 plus 5x is, so it's going to be D. Okay, perfect. Now we're going to move on to part 2. So the first 2 questions we reviewed were basically just giving us inequalities to identify. And now we're just going to go into writing the equations and expressions ourselves and solving them. So for part 2, let's start with this one. Nadia paid $1 to mail a letter. The cost to mail a letter is 55 cents for the first ounce of weight plus 15 cents for each additional ounce. So for the first ounce, it's 55 cents. And then for each additional one, it's 15 cents. What was the weight in ounces of the letter Nadia mailed? So what I can see here is that they already told us what the total was. They already told us how much she paid. And that it, off the bat, just cost 55 cents for the first ounce. So this is the fixed amount. And then it's 15 cents for each additional ounce. So it's asking, what is the weight in ounces? The number of ounces is going to be our variable. And in this case, I'm just going to label it using the common variable x, but you can use any letter you want to represent it. And the rate is the 15 cents it costs per ounce. So I'm going to set up the equation with the fixed, so 55 cents plus 15 cents times x is equal to $1. Okay, great. And then from there, we're just going to go ahead and start solving. So we're going to simplify and isolate x. So we first start with the constant, subtract 55 cents from both sides. And then we get 0.15x is equal to, I'll zoom up a little bit because I realize it can be a little bit hard to see from a distance. 0.15x is equal to 0.45, and then we're going to divide by 0.15. And then we get that x is equal to 3. So it's asking us what was the weight in ounces of the letter Nadia mailed. So a lot of students would actually select 3 from the get-go, but it almost feels like a trick question because it's 3 additional ounces after the first ounce, which means that there are actually 4 ounces in total, which makes the right answer D, right? Because this is ounce number 1, and then there's 3 here. So 1 plus 3 is equal to 4. I hope you caught that before me. Let's move on to the next question in part 2. So a person buys a used car with a down payment of $1,200 and makes monthly payments of $275 for 3 years. So a down payment is just like a one-time cost and makes monthly payments. Monthly, I'm gonna highlight that a ton. I don't think you can even see it now, but anyways, makes monthly payments of $275 for 3 years. What is the total amount the person pays for the car? So unlike the previous questions, we have to determine the total amount. So we're gonna first start by identifying the different parts of this equation. The first one is this is not the total. The first one is the fixed amount. So the down payment is just a one-time fee. That's the fixed value. Then they're doing monthly payments of $275 for 3 years. I want to see how many months are in 3 years, so that way I can determine the number of months to multiply $275 by. And $275 is the rate, and then X is equal to the number of months. So to find the number of months here, we first know that we have 3 years. Now, how many months are in a year? There are 12 months in 1 year, right? So we can go ahead and multiply 12 months like this. And don't worry too much about unit conversion. I think this one is more straightforward than the unit conversion questions we'll review in another video in another week. But this is I would say the best setup for more difficult conversions. But for now, if you just did 3 times 12, that's totally okay. So we can cross these out, they cancel out. And so we get 3 times 12 months is equal to 36 months. Perfect. So now it's asking us to find the total. So the total, remember, is equal to the fixed plus rate times the variable. And in this case, we determined that the fixed amount is $1,200. Oh, I realize that my face is covering. Okay, the solution. Okay, great. Let's keep going. So $1,200. Let me actually move my camera somewhere else. Okay, amazing. Plus a rate of, the rate is $275 for 36 months. Okay, perfect. Now we just have to go ahead and multiply this. I don't know about you, but I definitely do not know what 275 times 36 is off the top of my head. So I'm going to go ahead and just quickly solve this. Okay. Okay, so I got that the amount the person pays for the car is $9,900, but remember, we also have to add it to that $1,200. So then for down here, I'm going to rewrite this as $1,200. Oh, I realize you can't even see that. Okay, $1,200 plus $9,900, which would get you $11,100. I believe that's the correct answer. Oh, wait. What did I look at? That's wrong. Okay, no, that is correct. Okay, perfect. So the correct answer is going to be C, 11,100. Just make sure that I always recommend students to continuously rewrite the equation or expression as they simplify, just because it's easy to think, oh, I did all this multiplication over here, I'm done, and you select B as the answer when it's actually C, once you add the fixed amount on top of that. And then if you got the answer choice A, that's because you multiplied by the number of years, not the months, and that's where the unit conversion comes in. And where close reading also is helpful. Okay, we're on to part 3. It's the second to last group, so we're almost there. Thank you for hanging on. A homeowner has a budget of $135 for the installation of a light fixture. So a budget just means that this is the maximum amount of money they can spend. An electrician charges $60 per hour plus a one-time trip charge of $45. So off the bat, we can just start by labeling this. So the budget is going to be the total they can spend. And then $6 per hour. $60 is the rate. And then X equals the number of hours. That's going to be our variable. And then a one-time, they already tell us off the bat, the one-time trip charge of $45 is going to be our fixed amount. So now let's read the question. What is the greatest amount of time in hours the electrician can work on the installation while staying within the homeowner's budget? It asks us to write our answer as a decimal. So let's go ahead and set up the main parts. We always have fixed plus the rate times variable and then the total on the other side. So we can start writing this as 45 plus 60x is equal to a total of 135. And actually not equal in this case. We're setting up an inequality. And the reason why I know we're setting up an inequality is because it's asking for the greatest amount of time, which means that when we have that in the question, we're going to be solving an inequality. So what we have to decide is what direction is the inequality symbol facing. So in this case, if this trips you up, remember just to think about what represents each side. So $135 is the budget. That's the max they can spend. And this is the amount they spend on the left. And they have to make sure the amount spent is less than or equal to the maximum that they have to spend. Otherwise, they would be broke or they would go into debt, which they don't want to do. So we're going to do less than or equal to over here. And then we can go ahead once again and isolate X as we've done in previous questions. Okay, 60x. Okay, I realized that I kind of breezed through that last part, so I'll kind of quickly rewrite it. It's going to be divided by 60 on both sides. And then this leaves us with x is less than or equal to 1.5. And yeah, it says write your answer as a decimal. You may have gotten 3/2 first, but that just converts to 1.5. So our final answer is going to be x is less than or equal to 1.5. And that's the greatest amount of time they can work in hours. If you really wanted to check, you could go back and plug x into the equation to make sure it's less than or equal to 135. But on the SHSAT, you do not have enough time to do all that unless you're, for whatever reason, you want to check again. Let's go to question 67 now. And once again, I do encourage you to pause the video and write and try to answer these questions by yourself before I share the solution. Okay. To make party invitations, Macy could buy a package of paper for $10.50, or she could buy X individual sheets of the same paper for 15 cents each. What is the largest value of X that would make buying the individual sheets less expensive than buying the package? So in this case, the package represents the total. And then she could buy X individual sheets of the same paper for 15 cents each. So 15 cents is equal to the rate. And then it already shows that X is equal to the individual sheets. So if we were to set this up, it would be 0.15 times X is going to be less than or equal to, not equal to, just less than 10.50. Because it's saying that she wants to buy the maximum number of individual sheets for a total that is less than the 10.50 that we see here. So from there, we're not going to include the equal sign because we want it to be less expensive, not just as expensive. So we go ahead and divide by 0.15, and then we can go ahead and set up a, we can do long division for this. So if I were to set this up, I'll do it on the side here. Okay, 15. And what I did is I basically just moved over the decimal symbols for each one. So if I wanted to visually demonstrate that, I just moved it over twice. And that's how I got these numbers. So 15 goes into 105. What I recommend doing is actually writing out the multiples on the side if you feel very stuck, like me right now. So I'm going to let me quickly write that out. And you can see that it goes in how many times? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 times. So 15 goes into 105 7 times. It doesn't go into 0 any times. So we end up with the answer being 70. But X being equal to 70 means that 0.15 times 70 gets us 10.50. And we want it to be less expensive. So in order for it to be less expensive, we can just buy one sheet less, which means that the actual answer is 69. And that's why it's important to think closely about what they're actually asking you for, because, if you're going through this really quickly, you're gonna be like, okay, I got the answer is 70, but we want this total to be less than this total. And we know from solving it, 0.15 times 70 would get us exactly 10.50, and we want it to be anything less than that while also being the maximum amount, which means 69 is the correct answer. Okay, now we're on to part 4, which are the challenge questions. I think these will be pretty fun to do together, but obviously if you want to challenge yourself, pause the video and then I'll review the answer after. So each week, Leon has fixed expenses of $12.50 at his furniture shop. It costs him $150 to make a chair in his shop, and he sells each for $275. What is Leon's profit if he makes and sells 25 chairs in 1 week? So I want to define what the term profit even means. So I'm just going to go ahead and write that out a little bit over here. Okay, so profit the revenue, which is the total amount of money generated. If you've ever heard that term, revenue is just the total amount of money generated by sales minus the cost. So it's the amount they had to pay in order to get those sales. And that'll make sense in just a second. So they're asking for profit, and we need to determine what the revenue and costs are separately. So let's start first with the revenue, and I'll just highlight this. Actually, instead of blue, I'll use a green. Okay. So let's look into this. It costs him $150 to make a chair, and he sells each for $275. Okay, great. And he sold 25 chairs. Okay. So over here, we have $275 times 25. And then because he sold 25 chairs and he sold each one for $275, so that's why I multiply them. And then I'm going to, the cost is going to be in red. So the cost, it shows it costs him $150 to make a chair. So this is $150 times 25. But let's not forget about the fixed expenses. So this is a one-time cost of $1,258. So we're going to add that to the cost here. Okay, great. Let's solve each one separately now. 275 times 25. We can go ahead and solve this on the side. Okay, so the revenue is $6,875, which I'll write over here. And then the cost is 150 times 25 plus 1250. So I'm just going to go ahead and also solve this over here on the side. 150 times 25. So that's 3,775 plus the 1,250. And let's just go ahead and write that out too. So that's 3,775 plus 1,250. All right, 5,025. Okay, perfect. And so we have the profit and we have the cost, which I'll highlight over here. So this is the cost, and then this is the profit. And as I originally set up, we have to subtract these from each other. So to do that, 6,875 minus 5,025 is 1,850. So it seems that I made a calculation error. Let me quickly just double check my math here for 1 second. 275 times 25 is 6,875. And then I'm going to make sure the other side looks correct. Plus 1,250. I think when I added these together, I think somewhere along the lines, I think I messed up. So this is supposed to be 5,000. By the way, just wanted to point that out. This should be 5,000. And so when we subtract these from each other, it should be, let's see, it should now be 1,875, which brings us to answer choice A. So I just wanted to quickly review this question as one of our challenge questions because you have to understand what profit even means to solve this. Okay. On to the very last question, since I know you've been with me for about 30 minutes now. The cost of shipping a package is $12 plus $2 for each additional pound over 3 pounds. Which expression represents the total cost in dollars of shipping a package that weighs P pounds? Assume that P is greater than or equal to 3. Okay. So it's basically saying that, I realize that you can't even see the question that I'm going over, sorry. So I hope you're doing the following worksheet and you caught what I was saying. But essentially, they're saying that the number of pounds is going to be 3 or above. So you're essentially almost always going to get charged $2 for each additional pound over 3 pounds. Okay, so first let's do what we always do. We identify the fixed cost. So in this case, the fixed one is, let me quickly, I know why it was writing like that, but the fixed cost is that $12. And you can see here that they both set up as the fixed being 12. So I'm leaning towards answer choices E and F. And then plus $2 for each additional pound over 3 pounds, which means that we should only be charging $2 for any pound. Okay, so if P is 5, so basically let's test this out with a number in case you're feeling a little lost. If P is equal to 5 pounds, right? That means that we're only going to be charging $2 for each additional pound over 3 pounds, which means we're only charging $2 for 2 of those pounds, if that makes sense. Because here, minus 3, because we don't charge for the first 3 pounds, is going to be 2 pounds left over. So $2 times 2 is going to be $4 extra. Anyways, that's not the point, it's how much they're charging more. That's not the question. It's asking us to pick the expression. So in this case, what we just did is we had to subtract 3 over here. You can see we had to subtract 3 from 5 in order to identify the amount that we multiply by 2, which means that E is not the correct answer because we're not adding 3 pounds to the amount. That means that F is correct because we have to subtract 3, so that way we don't charge $2 for those first initial 3 pounds, if that makes sense. But I think this is a really good strategy, is to just plug in a simple number to see, I guess, like how do you evaluate it so you're not too confused, hopefully. And then these cases, 3 is being treated as the fixed cost because it's talking about the total cost is being represented in all of these. So that wouldn't make sense either, which means F is definitely the right answer here. Whew. Okay, so if you followed along, thank you so much. Go ahead and leave a comment if you feel like it was helpful, if you have any questions, if you thought I could do better in one area, let me know. And stay tuned because every week I'm going to be sharing a new video that goes over another concept. So that way, instead of blindly taking SHSAT practice tests, you can actually review the areas that you feel like you need more targeted practice in. And if you're looking for that additional support, go ahead and check out the link in bio for my targeted practice for the SHSAT. I hope to see you inside the community. It is totally free. Yeah, so just go ahead and check that out, and I'll see you in next week's video. Okay, bye.